Anyhow, they don't like us. Which is, by the way, not true. Because in Oslo years, the world was applauding Israel, with good reason or with bad reasons. But the world was applauding Israel in Oslo times. But, you know, as Noam Chomsky phrased it after he was expelled from Israel a few months ago, he said Israel lost any kind of rational consideration. All the reactions of Israel has very little to do with rational considerations. You could take even the flotilla. What did Israel gain? How come that nobody in Israel is asking the most simple questions? What for? Leave morality, leave international law, leave all kind of values. Practically, what did Israel gain out of it? This very simple question is not being raised at all in Israel. They are all just busy with who was responsible and who was not responsible. And I don't know if you heard, but the Chief of Staff of the Army, in his testimony to the investigation committee in Israel, said last week that the IDF had drawn the lesson out of the flotilla. And what is the lesson that the Chief of Staff of Israel had drawn out of the flotilla? That next time Israel is going to use snipers. And this is being said after Castled, after the enormous international price that Israel had paid for killing civilians in an illegal way, in a criminal way. After all this, the Chief of Staff says that next time we'll use snipers. What is the meaning of using snipers? It means that they will just kill civilians without any reason, from the distance. And this he says in public, and nobody criticizes him for this. This is being accepted as the right lesson. This should be the lesson from the flotilla. So when things are going to this direction, you can't expect anything to come from the Israeli society. Another crime of mine, another shameful thing I'm doing is to participate every Saturday in a popular debate program in the Israeli mainstream TV, where usually you can imagine yourself that it's not very pleasant. There are 6 right-wingers and me, all of them attacking me week after week, very personal, very brutal, very aggressive, screams you can't hear. Many times it's better because you can't hear, you can't understand, say it all. But last week I was asking, you know, in the Israeli media, all of it, except with my newspaper, the people who were on the flotilla are defined terrorists. It's without even, you know, nobody even asked. Sure, they are terrorists. I mean, it's common knowledge. And I tried to ask the most simple question: what is the definition of terrorist? Did they attack civilians? Did they threaten civilians? How come you use this term in such an automatic way, voluntarily, in a free society? You can call them any way you want, but you choose to call them terrorists. Why? You all know it's a lie. You can say maybe they were aggressive, maybe they shouldn't have used what they used, but stick to facts. Everything you can say about them. Terrorists, they were not, by definition, it's not a question of political views. Terrorist has a very clear definition. They had nothing to do with terror. But no. And you know, people looked at me as if I'm lunatic. How could I dare to raise such a stupid question? Why to call them terrorists? So this is the domestic arena. Now from the outside, not much better. I truly believe the world had changed, is changing, but very slowly. And here again, let's not have too many illusions. For people like me, one deep disappointment is already clear, and this is about the present American administration. Huge disappointment. I don't see that this might change, but you know, I wish I'll be wrong. But let's look at Europe. I will give you a very small example. A few weeks before I was prevented of going to Gaza, I went to cover really one of the most heartbreaking stories I was covering, and believe me, I covered many heartbreaking stories. It was this house in Gaza where they were living a paralyzed mother and her daughter. That's it. Two women in one, I can't even call it house, it's really, I saw poor houses in Gaza. This was worse even than what you have seen, Khaled. And those two were sleeping together in one bed, and the night before I came there, a missile hit the house, and the daughter was killed in the arms of her paralyzed mother. And I came there the next day, and the mother was lying there. She was half conscious, and really, I can't remember many bigger tragedies than this. And at this day, I was accompanied by a well-known TV reporter from France, from the commercial, most popular TV channel. And he made a story about my work in Gaza. When we came out from this house, I'm describing it, I think, in the book, I don't remember, I think I was describing it in the foreword. When I was going out from the house, coming out, he interviewed me. And he asked me, what do you feel? And I told him, listen, this is one of those moments that I am ashamed to be an Israeli. Because this missile was in my behalf, in my name. I carry responsibility for this missile. And as long as I live in Israel and carry an Israeli citizenship, I'm ashamed to be an Israeli. Okay, we went home. The next morning he calls me up, this reporter, and says, we are not going to broadcast this interview. I said, some technical problem? I said, no technical problem. Our editors in Paris say that our viewers will not tolerate the sentence that you say that you are ashamed to be an Israeli. France, commercial TV, small Jewish community relatively to the Muslim community for sure, and still this sentence could not be broadcast in France. So again, we are in Europe. We can try our best, but we have to understand that still Europe is still led by very pro-Israeli forces. I don't want to get into it, it has many reasons. We were, Mick and I were talking about it on the way, how there is still a gap between the governments and the public opinion, while the governments are much more pro-Israelis than the public opinion in most of the countries. Things are changing, but again, very slowly. So now if I come to sum the whole picture up, I'm really confused to leave you with this pessimistic, I guess, view, because I don't see hope for change from within Israel. I don't see the world doing enough. And when I say world, unfortunately, I mean first of all the United States. I truly believe that an American president, an American administration could have put an end to the occupation within months. Within months. Israel never was so depending on the United States, so isolated in the world. And when I say depending, I don't mean only economically or militarily, but also politically. And this could have been used as a tool to put pressure, to put an end to the occupation. But this does not happen, and doesn't seem to happen. All those games, freezing the settlements, not freezing, 2 months more, 2 months less, including terraces or not including terraces, including synagogues or not including synagogues, and it's 1.5 years now. And nothing moved. And we are back in the same place. So I don't see much hope from there. And then the question, with what are we left? The chances for the two-state solution, as most of you know, mean, either it's too late, or if you want it or not. And if it's not too late, I don't know how you call it in English, in football you have the special time you add for injuries. Yeah. How? Extra time. Extra time. Okay. In Hebrew we call it injuries time. So we are now in injuries time. If at all, if there is still a chance, but can you see an Israeli leader who will evacuate 500,000 settlers? It's a joke. Can you see an American president who will force an Israeli prime minister to evacuate 500,000 settlers? It's a joke. So not from the inside, not from the outside, Palestinians will have to wait for the next generation. I think the present generation is totally paralyzed. Big part of them in jail, big part of them were really beaten to death. And I think the atmosphere today in Palestine is of a broken people, of a broken generation at least. A generation who went to the second intifada, who sacrificed a lot and gained very, very little, if at all, if at all. And I meet those ex-fighters from the second intifada, and part of them are really broken and desperated. I don't see, it will take some years until there will be a new Palestinian generation who will be willing to really struggle again. And I don't know in which way, because with the Palestinians it's really a lose-lose situation. If they don't fight, if there is no terror, who cares about Palestine? Look at Gaza. It's terrible to say, but when Gaza doesn't launch missiles in Tel Aviv or Sderot, who cares about Gaza? Who hears about Gaza? Remember the Sharm el-Sheikh conference? The whole world was there. $4 billion were promised to Gaza for rehabilitation after Cast Lead. All the leaders of the entire world were there. Not $1 was passed ever since then, and it was an official meeting of the leaders of the world. But you know, Gaza is silent, so why would we care? So if Gaza is not launching missiles, nobody cares. When they launch missiles, so they are terrorists. So we can't deal with them, and they lose in their image in the world, and the world immediately hugs Israel. I just want to remind you this unforgettable scene of all the leaders of the EU coming to meet the Israeli Prime Minister in the middle of Cast Lead. I don't remember if the British Prime Minister was then with them or not, but it was one of the most shameful scenes. They didn't bother to go to Gaza at all. They came to hug Ehud Olmert in the middle of the operation. One Prime Minister said it was one of the most unforgettable evenings he had ever had, and he missed his plane. He stayed another day just to stay longer in this unforgettable dinner. This is the world. So in this framework, and by this I want to conclude and really leave time for questions and remarks. In this framework, I can only say one thing, that in this part of the world, in the Middle East, I think you have to be realistic enough to believe in miracles. I don't see right now any other way to get out from where we are. And it's again against any logic. Because the same United States who went to Iraq and went to Afghanistan, if the United States would have done, and the United States doesn't have to send troops to Israel to put an end to the occupation, if it would have put 10% of the energy that it had put in Iraq and in Afghanistan, so-called, to guarantee the peace and the security in the world, while the dispute in the Middle East